Good evening, everyone. Tonight's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. With the we'll go straight to the agenda. Everybody's aware of the emergency evacuation procedure. Just head out the nearest door to the car park. Number 2, apologies for absence. We've received apologies from Councillor King, Councillor Cousins and Councillor Ryby. Agenda number 3, we'll move to the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of July 2021 and move to have them recorded. Is that correct? Yep. If there's no objections. No. Okay, so we can have them recorded, please. Yep. Moving on to item number 4 on the agenda is urgent business. I would like to bring something up on the urgent business, which is I'd like to go over the rota again for substitutes and attendance for overview and scrutiny. So I'll come back to that later. Number 5, declarations of interest. Members are to indicate whether they have declaring any interests under the Code of Conduct. Has any member got any declaration? No. Okay, no declarations of interest. Number 6 on the agenda is customer complaints and compliments on pages 7 to 18. And I'll hand over to Margaret Wallace. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report that provides committee with an update on the first quarter performance and customer complaints and compliments. In quarter 1, the Council received 14 complaints, 12 complaints dealt with at stage 1 and 2 escalated to stage 2. One of the complaints in quarter 1 required a further extension with agreement with the complainant, which was due to the complexity of the complaint. One stage 1 complaint did not meet the timescales and was overdue by 1 day, and an apology was given to the complainant. All stage 2 complaints were answered within the procedural timescales, and the analysis of the types of complaints can be found in Appendix 1. The majority of complaints were not upheld and as the procedures for Council were followed. However, all feedback is vital on any complaints that we received, and some of the recommendations resulted in improvements to services, for example, extra information being put on the website. You will also see that there is the compliments for quarter 1. There was 14 compliments, and the topics of the compliments were from citizens and businesses as for a response to the COVID and the support they received from Rydale District Council. The committee are asked to note and endorse the continued performance of a good performance of the complaints and compliments received in quarter 1 of the reporting cycle. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Margaret. Is there any questions? Councillor Rain.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Basically, just for me, I've had a gentleman get in touch regarding the public conveniences in Rydale, and very embarrassed by the state of them. And I noticed in some of the information and consequent replies I've had from just checking what's happening with them, that some of the toilets are getting painted. Well, I know myself, I went and had a look because I've never actually had the privilege of using any of the public conveniences. And when I did look, I thought, how on earth is just painting them going to help? And I just wonder if there's anything else going to be done to some of them besides painting.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Green. So yes, this was highlighted from complainants, but we have been looking into this. So assets and facilities are aware of the work that needs to be done, and there is a schedule of work. It's not just painting, there are actually other
work that is underway with that. I can provide details of that. I'm sure Philip and me can get the schedule of works that's actually been done basically for the public conveniences, if that would help. But yeah, it was raised by a member of staff, but there is a detailed schedule of works essentially that is in place to address the issues. So it's not just about them being painted, there are other work scheduled to be undertaken.
Sorry, thank you.
Is there any other queries, Councillor Watt?
Thank you. Thanks, Margaret. I'm just wondering, when we're talking on 5.1, page 8, about we will tackle inequality, what kind of outlines are you looking for there? And what measures are you putting into place to say that we're improving on that? I know it's a very difficult question, but I'm quite intrigued as to that particularly stands out, and I'm just wondering what the parameters are for you to put that in and actually qualify what you're doing there. Thank you.
Yeah, so essentially this is part of our council plan, so it's linked to the work that Louise has been done, which is another agenda item that I'll be presenting for Louise now that she's left the council. So essentially what we're trying to do is make sure that things are accessible for people to be able to complain, or if they have difficulties in complaining, that we've actually put some of that within our complaints procedure. So for example, if somebody cannot put something in writing, that they can phone into us, we will take the complaint that way. So we're trying to address some of the things to make it more easy and equitable for all people to be able to make the complaints.
So could I just ask how you're going to show progression with that, though, over relevant quarters?
Yes, so it's in the other agenda item, but part of the paper on equalities gives the outline action plan for that, and that will be about accessibility and gathering that information. So I can give you a further written response on that if it's something that you want more detailed information on.
Yeah, I know it's a very difficult topic and how you quantify it, but I was just quite intrigued as to what the mindset was in terms of, you know, deeming inequality and how we're going to get rid of it. The other question I wanted to ask you, Margaret, was to do with the complaints and extensions on complaints. I know we like to get things resolved in a certain timescale, but how many really go to the higher level, if any? And what would you do if there were need to be an extension? How would you sort of nullify it?
Yeah, so essentially that is part of the process that we brought in, that the complaints and insight officers would go work with the service if there's further information, especially if it's quite a complex complaint. We want to try and get it right at the first time rather than escalating to stage 2. So if there was multiple, like the one that we asked for an extension, there was multiple elements to the complaint, and because of some of the kind of parameters that we had, they wouldn't have had all the information for the 10 days. So we did go back and say, look, would you be happy to wait for the full response and then follow up? And they were. So it's really a conversation with our complainants to make sure that they get the full response and they're not having to come back to us at a stage 2 to seek further information. So it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes with more complex cases, as you can imagine, there is more information required before we can give that full response. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, the other side of that I was thinking was, though, that you've got a certain time scale to gather information and you can't just extend it ad nauseum. So
no, definitely not, and that's why we always go back to the complainant to ask for that if they are willing to do that extension. If they're not, then we will escalate it to a stage 2. But it really is about that good kind of conversation with the complainant, because essentially what we do is we want to learn from the complaints that are coming in and make the service improvements. So and we want to communicate that to anybody that does complain to us.
That's great, thank you.
Councillor Oxley.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Couple of observations, then I guess it's a question, Margaret. Nice to see we're still getting really positive feedback about the way we've handled the businesses. I think that's, we keep patting ourselves on the back about the way we've done that, but this just evidences the fact that, you know, the message is out there that it's a job that's been well done. I've been on this committee long enough to remember when the process was not working as well as it is now, and things weren't getting done on the timeframes that they were supposed to be done. So I think where we are now is significant progress from, you know, where we were some years ago, which is good. The question really is that, going back to what Councillor Wass said, presumably just like everything we do in council is going to be trawled across the climate change plan, then everything that happens in council is going to be trawled across the inequalities policy going forward. Is that the right assumption to make?
Yeah, definitely. We have to make sure that our corporate priorities are embedded in all of our services going forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
Thanks for that. Like Councillor Oxley, it's good to see the compliments. I think those few compliments represent a very wide feeling of the people that were helped by this council through the pandemic. So good to see them on this agenda. Simpler question, really. How do you know when you've got a complaint? How do you decide when it's a complaint or not? I say that because sometimes I've experienced difficulty in getting a service, and rather than sort of go the extra mile, you sometimes feel that someone just says, oh, well, we'll lodge a complaint, it'll go through our processes, goes into that machine, gets chewed up, comes out as a sort of anonymous statistic. And you think, well, where was my help in that? So how do you decide when you've got a complaint?
Yeah, so really that comes down to the statement is 6.2. So a complaint is defined as the council's an expression of dissatisfaction about our action or lack of action, or about the standard of service that's been provided to people on their behalf. So you're quite right, there's some maybe inquiries that we get in are maybe just about it's maybe just a question or a request, or they don't want to progress it to a complaint. But yeah, it's more about the expression of dissatisfaction or lack of action. So the fact that they've contacted us and we haven't done anything about it, or that actually they think the standard of service, for example, like the public conveniences, you know, that is stuff that we really need to take as a complaint and actually action and make sure that we resolve. So that is the distinction between that. We also have to watch out that it's not an active service, so the service is not dealing with the actual inquiry or a service that's been delivered, and that it has actually come to fruition, shall we say. So for example, an antisocial behaviour complaint on noise, that there's been an outcome for that and it's not in the middle of the process. So it's really just about that very much expression of dissatisfaction in action, or that they don't feel that the standard of the service has been correct.
So do you ask them whether they'd like to have a complaint, or do you just do it in spite of them? Sometimes I've had complaints lodged in my name and I really didn't want a complaint, I just wanted the thing to be fixed. So do you ask them, you know, would you like me to take this as a complaint, or would you rather not?
No, what the customer, so when it comes into the customer complaints inbox, what the staff do there is they read through the complaint, and if they feel that it meets the criteria, then they will lodge the complaint and go back to the complainant just to ensure that these are the things that you want to complain about. Now, sometimes you're right, some people come back and say, well, actually, I didn't want to make a formal complaint, I just wanted to highlight it to you. And that's their right to be able to do that. But we sometimes do seek clarity on that. But yeah, if it falls within the criteria that I've stated, then we would take that as a complaint. But we have started that, going back to the complainant just to clarify that these are the actions or these are the complaints that you're complaining about. So we're making sure that we're answering all of their questions and there isn't anything that they would like to add to it.
Councillor Raper.
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't a specific question, but a comment I'd like to make when we get to that point.
Is there any more questions? No, if you'd like to make your comment now, Councillor Raper.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Very, very good numbers that we've got back. And like Councillor Oxley, I remember when they weren't coming back as positive as these are. The time that these complaints are coming in is COVID. And personally, I was expecting a huge amount of complaints to come in, and they didn't. That's not because people are dissatisfied or had the time on their hands to go and really explore themselves if they wanted to do such, and they didn't. So that shows that what we're doing is reasonably good. I take Councillor Wood's point about measurement. We need have a look at possibly a deeper look on the way that we measure. But looking at April and May and June of in 21, 4 at the beginning in April, 21 in May and 21 in June. Pretty low for that time of year and for what was happening nationally and locally and how people were coping or not at that particular time. These are extremely good numbers. So I'd like to compliment the team on handling these in such a positive fashion, and the result and the feedback we've got from those, because you put the feedback you've got from these people into this report as well. And we did have some compliments as well. The speed of putting money into people's pockets who required it from business, several. And that is exceptionally good and puts us in good stead and in good standing in the community. So I welcome that wholeheartedly. They are good numbers, as I say, from what we used to get. And the first time that we actually got these numbers, they don't stack up anything like to what we've got today. So I commend the team on what they've been doing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Raper. Thank you, Margaret. I don't think there's any other questions. I'd like to move that the report is noted and endorse the continued good performance of complaints and compliments received in the first quarter of 21-22 of the reporting cycle. Thank you, Councillor Raper, seconded. If there's nobody against, if we can move to a general affirmation.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 7, it's the risk management update, and I'll hand over to Simon Copley.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be familiar with this report on the corporate risk register. We report into this committee every 6 months, and the corporate risk register is a continually evolving living document that we frequently review and update as part of our regular management processes. In terms of the scoring of risks, just briefly in summary, we look at whether a risk is high, medium or low by assessing the likelihood of a risk occurring and the impact that it would have if it did occur. If you look through the corporate risk register, there's 3 scores for each risk. There's basically a baseline score, which is the risk if we took no action to manage and control it. There's then the current score, which is based on all of the actions we've got in place to mitigate it. And then we have a target risk, which is looking forwards in terms of the actions we have planned for the future to further reduce and control the level of risk. It's worth me just highlighting in paragraph 5.2, there's reference to local government reorganisation, which is introducing significantly more risk into the system, as you would expect at a time of significant change, and that's currently being assessed. And as I've already mentioned, the risk register is continually being reviewed and updated to reflect developments in this area. The register is here for the committee to note the contents, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Is there any questions? Councillor Oxley.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Quite rightly, Simon, you've highlighted in 5.2 the impact of the local government reorganisation. I mean, clearly we're all aware that the potential impact that's going to have. I'm interested in how we see the issues within that in terms of increasing the risk. I mean, obviously there's presumably one about workload and about staff numbers to manage the workload. Is that the only impact that we think that particular issue is going to have on the risk? Simply our ability to manage to do it all?
Just looking through to point you to the pages where the risk is set out in more detail. So page 52 of the agenda sets out the detailed causes and consequences in terms of the risk around local government reorganisation, but the headline description reads failure to plan for local government reorganisation, operate effectively during reorganisation and plan for and manage the transition to a new local authority. I think in terms of resources, it's worth just drawing attention to there's potential risk both around the actual transitional processes and the work we need to do on reorganisation, but also on maintaining and delivering our business as normal services for residents as well.
If I may, Chair. Thank you, Simon. I can read the words there. I really just wanted to have them sort of expressed. Presumably that means that there is likely to be the need to actually further increase the staffing requirement if we're going to manage this? Or is that, am I asking the wrong question at the wrong time of the wrong person?
I think at this stage there's still a lot of detail that's not yet clear about local government reorganisation and how it will work and what it will be required. So it's possibly slightly early to give a conclusive view on that, but clearly that's something that the Chief Executive as the Head of Paid Service, the Chief Finance Officer in terms of looking at financial planning, they'll be considering those issues and engaging with members as appropriate around them. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Simon.
Councillor Wass.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I do like the way the risk register is actually set out, because it's very obvious what the progression is. I was just wondering what the time frame was. I know we're talking about sort of quartiles, but when you've got something that's current, that's obvious, but it's kind of blurring across lines. How do you define when something has actually ended? Because it's kind of a living document. So what is the sort of borders, if you like, that we're looking at?
Just to clarify the question, are you asking at what point a particular risk is ended and we think we can remove it from the register, or at what point the register as a whole is ended?
Yeah, with a risk, but obviously if it poses no real risk, I mean, obviously there is always going to be an element of risk. It's a bit like an accident. An accident's going to happen. You don't know when, but you've got to have an eventual plan in place in case it does. But it's just, how do you define where the boundaries are, and when you're happy for the changes to occur between what was original, what becomes current?
I think through the regular review process that the Strategic Management Board undertakes, sometimes we've looked at restructuring the risk register. So it might be that we want to, something that was one risk, we want to separate out into two more specific risks, or it could be that something that was separated out previously we combine. So it is a very fluid document because we look at what the situation is in terms of the council and its services, and we look at the risk scores. If we've got things that are very low likelihood and very low impact, where we've got solid control systems in place and maybe we don't need to do so much action planning going forward, then it might be that we decide to take those items off the corporate risk register. But I don't think we'd lose track of those risks, because what sits below the corporate risk register is a series of service and project risk registers. So they might not be for such large scale or high profile risks, but risk management is being embedded in the organisation at every level. So and there's a process by which a risk at a lower level on a project or a service can be referred up to Strategic Management Board. If it's deemed it might be appropriate to include it on the corporate risk register, and equally there might be a situation where we think something can be moved down the hierarchy.
Just a further point, it's actually something I think falls under Stacey's remit according to the actual register, but she does mention, I can't remember exactly where it is, but a failure to secure sufficient government funding. And I was just wondering what the impact that has on the delivery of putting forward, you know, securities, if you like, within the register.
There is a risk included on financial management. I don't know if that's the one you were looking at, if it was funding on a particular aspect of the council's activities or the financial management overall. But Anton, as Section 151 officer, is responsible for the financial management risk, and members will be aware through the reporting processes on a quarterly basis and the work that's done around financial strategy, treasury management, and a lot of the audit work which this committee sees with its audit hat on. There's a lot of monitoring and controls in place to make sure that that the budget and financial management is sound.
Thank you. Yeah, it was overall. It was. Yeah. Thank you, Simon.
Yes. Any other questions, Councillor Raper?
Thank you, Chair. Would I be right in saying that this register is never-ending and not proposed to ever end, but adapt and duck and dive literally as it's needed to accommodate the need and what the risk is at the time something comes on? Because what's relevant today won't be tomorrow or next week, but it might be. So it has to be, as you say, fluid. I would say adaptable. So it has to be able to manage itself and be relevant to what we are being asked to do, is to make sure that that risk is acceptable, or as close to acceptable as possible to get.
I think through you, Chair, it is correct to say that the work on this is ongoing because situations are always changing. So we always need to update what's on the register, look at the controls in place and the actions planned.
Councillor Raper.
Thank you, Simon. I'd like to take this opportunity because the architect, or one of the architects of this particular system, Louise Wood, has gone to pastures new, and I would just like to pass to her my deepest commiserations for leaving us, and congratulations, and I hope she does well in whatever she's up to in future. But she did a marvellous job in taking members through how this risk worked, the mechanics of how it worked, and it was extremely valuable to me at the time when she did this, because it left no stone unturned, and we were thoroughly grounded in how this register works and the mechanisms that were involved into getting where they get and how the reports come from the work that the officers do. So I'm eternally grateful to Louise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Raper. Is there any other questions? No. Therefore, it is recommended that the committee notes the contents of the report and comments on the format and details of the corporate risk register. If there's nobody against that, we can take that as a general affirmation. Yep.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. If we move on to agenda item number 8, which is the Equalities Action Plan, which I believe, Margaret, you're going to take on.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll be presenting the report tonight, which Louise would actually pull together along with the action plan. So I wasn't involved in all of the process around the policy and action plan, so I'm happy to take questions, but I will provide a written response for you because I don't have all of the details of it, but I will present it to you tonight. So the purpose of the report is to ensure that Overview and Scrutiny Committee are cited on the action plan to deliver the organisation's equality objectives, and to request the committee to agree regular reports to committee in order to progress against the plan and to monitor. The committee are asked that the action plan be noted in all operational document to assist officers in the delivery of the equality actions, and that committee agrees that the overview progress against the action plan will be maintained through 6-monthly reports to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee going forward. The reason for the report coming forward is that Rydale District Council's equality scheme has to be updated in light of the Local Government Association Equality Framework and that the Public Sector Equality Duty. The new equality scheme comprises of 3 elements, which is the policy statement that was taken to policy last week, but will go to full council to be ratified and give any feedback on any amendments, and around the objectives and the action plan, which is within the pack. This is an operational document that officers will drive the progress of the action plan going forward. You will note that there's 14 objectives and engagement statement around in the pack as well. Some of the objectives, for example, item 1, we will improve our understanding of our communities by gathering analysis and sharing profile data, which can be used for evidence and decision making. So that's just kind of one example, but there is 14 throughout that with clear actions throughout the report. As I say, I'm just presenting the report tonight. Unfortunately, Louise has left us, and I can give any written feedback on any questions that might come from the committee tonight, and we will be given regular updates on the action plan going forward. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Margaret. Is there any questions? Councillor Oxley.
Probably an unfair question, Louise, given how you come into this. I understand the requirement for this. I look at the list of objectives and I worry about how that is going to translate. I mean, yes, it's an operational document, and yes, it's got to be, in effect, referencing anything that we do and watched against. I just wonder how easily that is going to translate into the day-to-day work of the people at Rydale District Council. I think the point I'm making is this is very important. But I do think that my question would be, do we have to be very careful about just how it does translate into the day-to-day work of people?
Yeah, I think that's why we kind of undertook the review, because essentially we needed to make sure that we were actually following our equalities duty kind of going forward. So that's why the report has been provided along with the action plans. But you're right that we need the capacity to be able to make sure that this is embedded and that people understand what we're kind of doing. So we are looking at that, and I will be looking at that kind of going forward. I have to say that some of the work that is highlighted in this is actually being progressed. So that's why I was mentioning about the area profiles. We have started to do work on the area profiles, and we were doing that even throughout COVID. And we have done stuff around an objective to working with partners and gathering information about our community's needs and aspirations. So we did start the work off with place standards within Pickering. Unfortunately, COVID happened. We have got all the outcomes in that, but we do want to go back to our communities because their priorities might have changed. So you're right, but I think what we're trying to do is try and embed this just in our everyday kind of work that we do, that it doesn't become an add-on, but it's something that we should be considering all of the time to get us in the right place that we need to get to. But we are looking at whether or not there is additional capacity required to make sure that we deliver it on this kind of going forward, which I can update committee on when we come back with our report.
Thanks, Margaret. And again, we're back to the question of capacity, but we'll have to deal with that as we go forward.
Is there any other questions? I've got a question, Margaret. It was just, where's objective number 1 about you'll improve the understanding by gathering the information? How exactly has that information been gathered? I know there's some detail there, but I'm just wondering how you've broken it down.
Yeah, so essentially what we've kind of started to do, more so within the community team, was we were looking at area profiles. So what we've done is we've divided Ryedale up into 5 kind of place-based areas linked to our towns. And what we've started to do is look at the data that's involved in that. So from the age of people to the geographical area to house prices. So a lot of stuff that kind of like embeds in this. And we're in the process of pulling together what we call insight documents that will give us that more information. So we'll be able to use that in directing some of our resources, shall we say, kind of going forward. But we're not only doing that, we're also looking at the assets within the area. So again, we can see what assets are there and what assets aren't there. So we can make sure that they kind of marry up together. So there is a kind of combination of us doing that through national information, which is census information, but also starting to look at what information do we gather as an organisation that from different departments, that we can look at that as well. So it is work in progress, but it's a combination of all of the things kind of going forward.
Thanks, Margaret. I was really, that's answered some of it, but I was sort of wondering about how you found out the data on sort of vehicle ownership and type of employment.
So that comes under the census information and some of the insight information that we get. So you can imagine that nationally there's a whole load of information through census information that is gathered about all of that kind of element of that. So what we've done is we've looked at a system that can pull all of that information together. So it does give us house prices, it does give us employability and what kind of employment it gives us. So it does give us quite good information for the whole of Ryedale and into the place-based areas. So we should be able to get that information. But yeah, it's a combination of different resources, shall we say, that are there nationally that we can draw on.
Thank you, Margaret. Is there any other questions? No further questions. It's recommended that the action plan be noted as operational document to assist officers in the delivery of equality actions. if there's nobody against that, we can take that as general affirmation again. Thank you. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 9, it's the progress report on the implementation of the Climate Change Action Plan and associated projects. And I think that's over to Philip Spur.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. In terms of a summary of the report, effectively what you have in front of you is a two-part report. Part A is basically a look in the rearview mirror to basically summarise the delivery of actions under the Climate Change Action Plan in the period since the last reporting to ONS in October 2020. And the second part of the report is a forward look in terms of setting out in summary, quite high level terms, proposed key climate change action plan actions in the 12 months ahead. The context for the report, and members will be very, very familiar with this, is the climate change emergency declared by the Council in October 2019 and the target set by members to achieve a zero carbon Rydale by 2050. I think Councillor Oxford already mentioned in the meeting the importance of the environment and climate change really percolating and permeating everything the Council does, and clearly that importance is reflected within the Council plan and the priorities therein. In terms of progress since October 2020 in the last report, progress is set out from section 6.2 onwards. I think the first point I'd really highlight, it's perhaps not explicitly said, but the fact now that we do have a much more robust, comprehensive and I think informative and helpful action plan than was previously the case. In terms of specific project delivery, again, there's a number of bullet points there, so I won't go through them all one by one, or perhaps just pick out one or two key highlights. I think one of the most important projects we've delivered in the period is the installation of EV charging points across the district, around about 20 points in public car parks and 10 workplace EV charging points. We have secured funding from what's called the Heat Network Delivery Unit, a government department, to look at geothermal opportunities within Rydale. 264 LED streetlights have been replaced with a commensurate carbon saving. We've secured more than £400,000 for home energy efficiency works. Crucially, what we now have is a carbon baseline for the council's activities. We didn't have that baseline previously, or we didn't focus on that baseline previously, but we now have the baseline carbon, and we've used 2018-19 as the last full pre-COVID year to give us an accurate baseline figure, and certainly the aspiration is to reduce those carbon outputs, and we've set a target of 5% reduction per annum going forward. Other point that's referenced in the report in terms of the progress made thus far is the fact that we now appointed a dedicated climate change officer, and that gentleman will be starting with us on the 1st of November. In terms of the other part of the report, which is the forward look, we have details set out in the table at 6.4, and you can see the key actions there split into effectively short, medium and long-term actions over the next 12 months. Won't go through those in detail, obviously members will have read them and they're in front of you in the table, but effectively what those actions do is form the action plan, the work programme for the new officer starting and his priorities for the next period of time. In detail, you've then got page 8 to 9 of your pack, the detailed action plan, which goes through things in more detail in terms of actions, deliverables, responsible officers and so on and so forth. And as I say, I think it's a much more comprehensive and I think helpful document to officers and hopefully to members than the previous action plan. So I'll probably leave it there, Chair, if that's okay, and I will happily try to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Is there any questions? Councillor Rain.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I just feel I'm a total novice in air quality and everything like that, and I try so hard to find out what is happening. And it was Councillor Thackeray that pointed out about the recent World Health Organization and the air quality, and I'm just wondering, you know, because of that, is anything extra being done? Is there anything as in an emergency? It is, you know, I worry so much because I just feel it's wonderful LED lighting and everything else, but what about all these cars that are not electric and, you know, so the electric points doesn't count for them. What is happening? What is for the future? I did email and put for our children and grandchildren in the future. I do worry a great deal about it, and I never hear anything. Nobody seems to reply to these emails regarding all councillors. And it's just because I am so concerned, and because I'm no expert, I would just love to know what is happening with Rydale in the light of this latest information. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Ray. Yeah, I have seen various emails around air quality floating around today, effectively. And certainly there will be a report and updates on that to Council and PNR in the imminent future. In terms of this specific climate change action plan, we don't have a particular air quality metric, if you like, as such. But there are a number of measures within the action plan, for example, around improved active travel and public transportation. You've mentioned electric vehicles. We are seeking to promote walking and cycling, electrification, hopefully, of the street scene fleet in due course. So air quality is really important on a number of specific aspects within the climate change action plan. But this action plan is more about carbon reduction than air quality per se. But improvements in air quality are, I think, a very positive and happy byproduct for what we're trying to do here.
Councillor Wass.
Yeah, just I'd like to come in on what Councillor Rain said, because I did read a couple of the emails that Councillor Thackeray sent out, and one of the worrying things is the impact that the expansion in housing locally is going to have upon all services. Yeah, we need housing, and people have got to live somewhere, but unless there's something done with the infrastructure and with the communication systems, we are just going to be breathing in nitrous oxide, probably pure, I would think. And I know Councillor Thackeray is passionate about this, and as Councillor Rain intimated there, you know, very little seems to be done in terms of the real worry about what is going to happen. We can't just keep on building and building and expecting everything to be okay. I know it's a difficult question to answer, Philip, but my main question to you really is, what do you feel? I know we're getting a climate change champion officer in November, as you said, but where do you feel we're going to fail? Because we're going to fail somewhere massively. So, I mean, what are your concerns as an officer?
Well, I think my starting point, Councillor Wass, will be to say I'm starting from the point, and I know colleagues starting from the point, that we are focused on achievement and success rather than failure here. So we have a baseline in terms of the emissions that RDC is currently emitting. We know where we currently are, and we have an action plan which will improve our RDC's corporate performance. So it's really important for me that we actually deliver that corporate performance as a council, because we actually then show leadership to our communities, to our businesses, to our residents, by actually doing the right thing and then encouraging and supporting those residents and those businesses to do the right thing as well. So we have to get our own house in order, and then if we do that, we can encourage others, demonstrate to others and support others in doing it. Quite simply, RDC's direct carbon outputs probably 2 or 3% of everything that is emitted within Rydale. So we can make our own contribution. That's really important. But as you say, there is then that wider 96, 97% that we have to influence by promoting electric vehicles, by making sure that our street scene fleet operates more effectively, by promoting more recycling, by encouraging tree planting, and so on and so forth. We can't do this alone. We have to work with partners, and RDC in itself will not sort the actions. But as I say, we are focused upon achievement, doing the right things, making sure RDC gets its house in order, and then making sure that other partners do the right thing and supporting them in any possible way that we can.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. I do like your optimism. It makes me feel as though I'm a real pessimist, but I just feel that, you know, we're kind of more and more as elected councillors seeing that things, even though we've got all this in front of us and it looks very good for the future, you know, and the longest long term I think I can see on here is a couple of years, and we're actually going past what the government are intimating as 2030, and we're going up to 2050, and we're supposed to be a green area, and we can see the problems here without being too pessimistic, you know, and I appreciate you're looking at it from the perspective of your job and what you think is going to happen. I appreciate that. But with all the best will in the world, I struggle to see it actually coming to fruition.
Right. As I say, yes, quite bluntly, it is part of my role and colleagues' role. But much more important than that, you know, I don't want to get perhaps into cliches, but you know, I've got kids. I want to make sure that those kids have a decent future and a decent environment within which to work, as you do with your children and grandchildren. So personally, I'm actually passionate about this agenda. Yes, RDC cannot solve everything on its own, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything. So I think there are real practical things that we can do and we are doing. And then we work with partners to actually make sure that they do the right thing as well. So for example, under the proposed devolution deal, that talks about North Yorkshire being a carbon negative region. That's the kind of level of aspiration that partners are looking for, and we can and need to play our role in that process.
Thank you. Cheers.
Councillor Bailey.
Thanks, Philip. Well done for getting a carbon baseline. You know, that's absolutely what we have to do before we can measure progress. Did we do that ourselves, or did we get somebody to do it for us? And you talk about carbon. I know when I do those things with land use, they talk about greenhouse gases because there's other things but carbon that are contributors, like, I don't know, like composting and stuff like that might contribute methane. So just tell me about the baseline. Did we do it ourselves, or did we get someone to do it for us?
No, on that, Councillor Bailey, we did the baseline ourselves. So we collected the information in-house and processed it in-house. In terms of the more technical questions with regard to methane and so on and so forth, a little bit outside my area of expertise in all honesty, but if there are specific issues around that, I'll happily kind of go away and provide further information on those points.
No, I think that my concern was just to make sure that our baseline was fit for purpose down the line. You know, I wouldn't want us to do it and be saying, right, we've measured this, and then we find that actually everybody else has got a different standard. So I think just making sure, even just running it past a consultant or an expert in this field, or maybe our new officer can do that, to make sure that we're talking the same language down the line.
Yeah, we can certainly test out and revisit the baseline, no problem at all with that. But I think, as you've alluded to, the fact that we do have a baseline, and if we measure consistently going forward, then we can actually demonstrate that process. But yes, we can certainly get the new officer to actually test out and double check that we're doing the right thing. Absolutely.
Is there any other questions? Councillor Oxley.
Thanks, Chair. Philip, you're quite right. All you can do and all your teams can do and the teams here can do is focus on the action plan that they've got and make those improvements, because that's what they're charged to do. I take the point, I too have seen the emails, I take the point about air quality, and some of these things that are in our plan that we're focused on will improve air quality. To me, it's very simple. If we want to make air quality a specific issue, then we have to do something to put it into the action plan, and that's something that members will have to do, because you can only do what you are charged with doing. So yes, it's an important issue, but the onus on that lies with the members, I think, not with you at this moment in time. I hope you'd agree with that, because you don't want your workload increasing too much. Can I just ask a specific question on the £430,000 on the home efficiency measures? I may have missed it when I've been through the paperwork. Does that come with caveats on how it can be used?
Yes, Councillor Oxley, there will be caveats around that. It's part of what's called the Local Authority Delivery to Home Energy Efficiency Programme.
Yeah.
It's basically around new boilers, installation and so on and so forth. But again, I can happily provide further, more detailed criteria if you would like that.
That would be very useful if you would, Philip. And my concern is, are we talking about retrofitting, or are we talking about doing things to new stuff as it happens? Because one, they're both important, but the second one is vitally important. You know, any of this that can go into something new, so that we don't have to retrofit in the future, would be a massive step forward. I just hope it hasn't come with caveats that mean it has to be spent on specific things that may not be what we want to spend it on.
Yeah, in terms of this particular grant, it certainly is for retrofitting activity rather than new build activity. So it is retrofitting, but as I say, Councillor, I'll get you the detailed criteria across in the next couple of days.
Yeah, fine, thank you, Philip. That's great, thanks.
Councillor Garbett-Moore.
Yeah, on page 94, I'm pleased to see that it does mention that Rydale will be, looking to increase the number of trees planted within Rydale, which is really obviously important, and it's noted. It's my understanding, as part of conversations with Louise and Emma Garvey, I think that's her name, Emma Garvey, yeah, that as part of the Queen's Jubilee celebrations, Rydale will be offering free tree samplings to schools and town and parish councils, which again is fantastic, but it's not noted in this report as an action, because the dates for that would be February to June 2022. So my question to Philip is he aware of that? If he is, could it be added to the action plan? And secondly, will the trees be sourced locally, or will they be from outside the district? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Gardner. Yeah, certainly I'm aware of that. We're doing it as part of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, but also part of National Tree Week, which runs from November this year onwards. Without embarrassing it too much, my colleague Emma Garvey is actually on the line, so I just wonder if, with your agreement, Emma could actually come in and perhaps say a little bit more about the tree programme, if you're able to, Emma.
Yeah, I can do that. As you said, Councillor Garbett-Moore, will be donating tree saplings to anyone who would like them. They're from the Woodland Trust, so I can't guarantee where in the country they've been grown and sourced from, but I can contact the Woodland Trust and see if they're able to give us some more information about that.
Thank you. Cheers.
Councillor Raper.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. From what we've learnt from Philip, the action plan, the new build and what goes in it, can we have a recommendation to P&R from this committee that it becomes part of council policy and is introduced and put into our council plan, that new build should require a bigger element of renewable and carbon neutral facilities within those new builds than is current. And I think that would placate, well, not so much placate, but find agreeable consensus from Joe Public. I know it would from me. I've been banging the drum on this one for a long time. That planning stage, new builds should be carbon friendly, all of it from now. And if we can get it into our local plan. I know this is a government-led issue in many respects, and we probably would trip up at that point. But is this something that's feasible, Phil?
Just in terms of that, Councillor, you've probably hit the nail on the head with a couple of comments you made there. I think, first of all, this needs to be, should members want it to be, a consideration of part of the local climate review process. So I think that is the appropriate mechanism to actually try and move that forward. I'm sure planning colleagues would have comments on that, but that's the appropriate mechanism to move it forward. You've also made a very, very valid point around kind of national regulations, building regulations, and so on and so forth. I think one of the challenges we face is that national regulations have, I'll say this from my personal perspective, it would be good if national regulations are much more stringent and much more demanding than they currently are with regard to environment standards and carbon efficiency in homes. But I think the mechanism is to go through the local plan review process. I think what I'd also say, just as one specific point as well, just to evidence the Council's commitment to this, we have agreed to, our members have agreed, to put additional funding into a social housing scheme in Pickering, which will actually enable new build development meeting new future home standard probably 2 or 3 years earlier than the government's introducing that standard. So that's just one example of the council being committed to improving the standard of new build homes, but it is through the local plan process.
Thank you for that vital and important information, Phil. Thank you.
Councillor Oxley.
Yeah, Philip, I just want to pick up on the trees issue. The plan reflects what we know we're doing in terms of improving the number of trees and planting trees. How does that relate to what other people in the area might be doing, and how do we become aware of that? I mean, I presume through partnership meetings and whatever, but or does it matter whether we're aware that somebody else might be planting 10,000 trees somewhere in Rydale that's nothing to do with us?
Yeah, I think, Councillor, I think it certainly does matter, and I think we're trying to be cited on those things. The key initiative around this is something called the Northern Forest, which is a partnership-based initiative to improve tree coverage, I suppose, really across West and North Yorkshire. And one of the things that Emma's been doing has been in conversation with Kirklees Council, that are leading that Northern Forest initiative, to begin to talk about how Rydale can play our particular part in the overall activity. It's going to take a little while to actually define what we can do, where the sites are, planting the right trees in the right location, and so on and so forth. But yes, fundamentally, this is about partnership effort, and we playing our part in that effort.
Thanks, Philip.
Councillor Rain.
Thank you. It's a brilliant idea, obviously, about new houses and what we can do with for the eco-friendly, etc. But this does not include cars, and with nearly every household, well, a majority of households with 2 cars, where do you go as far as saying to people you're only allowed 1 car, you're not allowed any cars? Because obviously Castlegate coming up to Malton from Norton and from Malton to Norton it's just going to get unbelievably worse for everyone, not just children, for the adults walking down, the air quality. And I just wonder, what's going to happen with all these new houses. Brilliant, let's make sure they have all eco-friendly, everything we can do. But what about the cars? Thank you.
Yeah, I think on that one, Councillor, obviously it's out with our ability to influence the number of cars per household. So obviously we can't directly do that. I think what I would say is that through planning on all major developments, and certainly the major development in Norton coming forward, we'll be looking to actually ensure that every home has EV charging points as part of the developments. In terms of the Castlegate area, there is a lot of work going on to try and reduce traffic, improve traffic flow, improve air quality down there. And there will be a trial one-way system being introduced by NYCC in the coming months to actually try and improve that particular area. We're also trying to improve walking and cycling by improving the environment and accessibility and so on and so forth. Are there easy answers? Unfortunately, there aren't, and I really wish there were. But we are seeking to kind of utilise the levers and progress the projects we possibly can in the most efficient and effective way possible.
Is there any further questions? Thank you, Philip. I'd like to recommend that the progress on the delivery of the Climate Change Action Plan and future actions to be completed is noted. Is there anybody against that? No, we'll take it for general information. Thank you.
Yes, Chair.
Move on to item number 10 on the agenda is the LGO annual review letter 20 to 21. Margaret, it's back to you again.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to give my apologies to committee. In 1.1, there is actually an error on the paper. You will have no doubt noticed that's an update to members, not of Senior Management Board. My apologies. It was for the overview and scrutiny. It should have been amended after pre-agenda, and I thought that had been done. So my apologies for that to start off with. So this report updates members of Overview and Scrutiny on the content of the annual letter received from the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman for the period of 2021. Committee are asked to note the contents of the letter that has been received from the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, which is an annual letter that we received. Just for background, the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman was formed under the Local Government Act 1974, and this was to remedy any injustice through independent and impartial investigation to support the improvement of local services when to look at complaints if they weren't handled properly. The Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman only look at complaints once they have went through our local complaints procedures, the stage 2 complaints before it would actually go for them, and if they are still remain dissatisfied, they will investigate. You will see from the report that for 2021 there was 2 complaints that were sent to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, but you will also see that they closed the complaint after the initial inquiry and did not progress. So they do look at these if they think that they have not been handled properly, but these were both closed. In 6.12, it gives you a comparative. You will see that across North Yorkshire councils, Rydale and only one other district council were the only 2 councils that did not have cases that progressed to detailed investigations. I would like to highlight that we hope this is definitely because of the new procedures that we've put in regarding the new complaints procedures. As you'll have seen from the previous report, we've got less complaints that actually get progressed to stage 2, which ultimately means that more people are satisfied. And you can see from the report that actually this is actually a really good report, that we didn't have anything that went on to further investigation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Margaret. Is there any questions? Councillor Bailey.
I just put my thumbs up, Chair.
Oh.
Good stuff.
I've got my glasses. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
It's recommended that members note the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman annual letter for 2020-2021. I think we can have that by general affirmation.
Yes, Chair.
Moving on the agenda to item number 11, which is a review of the work plan on pages 107 to 110. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. This just sets out the items of business pending for subsequent meetings of the committee. The only thing I'd highlight at the moment, members will recall, I think at our last meeting when the external auditors had given an update, there is still some question mark around the timescales for the completion of the accounts. So it may be that slips to a later meeting than indicated on the work plan, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Is there any questions? No questions. Does this can that be moved as well? Is it noted? Is it the work plan? Yeah, because we just have the work plan noted, please.
Cool.
Moving on to item number 12 on the agenda is the membership of the task groups. Simon.
Thank you. At the last meeting, it's recorded on page 5 of the agenda pack in the minutes, members put their names forward for the scrutiny topics they'd like to be involved in. The first one that we were looking to progress was on performance appraisals, but then affordable housing and civil enforcement had been identified as subsequent topics. I can just update members that the first task group meeting on performance appraisals is scheduled in, I think that's on the 19th of October from memory, and work has been progressing with colleagues from HR to prepare for that meeting and pull information together for consideration by members. But we agreed to put the item on the agenda at this meeting because there were some members not in attendance last time, and we just wanted to provide opportunity for anybody whose name isn't already down against a particular scrutiny topic to add themselves to the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Did you have a list of who was on the various committees at the moment?
So we've got on the performance appraisals task group, we've got councillors Bailey, King, Oxley and Ryby. For affordable housing, it was councillors Middleton and Wass, and for civil enforcement, councillor Garbett-Moore.
Thank you. Councillor Rain and Councillor Raper, do you have any preferences?
Civil enforcement, yeah.
Thank you. So Councillor Raper would like to go on to the civil enforcement, if that can be noted. Councillor Rain. Would you like to go on the affordable housing? Civil enforcement? Okay, if we can put Councillor Rain on the appraisals one, please. Thank you. The other members, Councillor Garbett-Moore, would you like to go on any of the other groups? No? We will be getting dates, won't we, Simon? There's none yet.
Yes, there's none yet because the committee had agreed to progress the topics in order, so we're looking at appraisals first and then we'll look at timescales for the other two afterwards.
So will the dates for that next meeting in October be sent to the relevant people?
Yes, we'll make sure they're circulated, and I think there's going to be some information coming out as well to read ahead of that first task group.
Thank you, Simon. If we can have that noted by general affirmation, please. Thank you.
Yes, Chair.
Moving on to number 13 on the agenda, pages 111 to 116 is decisions from other committees, and refers to the Policy and Resources Committee, which was held on the 29th of July 2021. And the minutes from the Policy and Resources Committee held on the 23rd of September 2021 are to follow. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Raper.
Not a question as such, but I did observe by electronic means the 23rd meeting until the shutters came down near the end for exempt. So I was present, but probably not obvious.
Thank you, Councillor Raper. Is there any other questions or comments? Councillor Oxley.
Just going to observe it that I felt the meeting on the July meeting, it was an interesting atmosphere for the P&R committee that night. I'd just like to know that and say no more than that. I felt it was a very contentious, quite grumpy meeting, but that's just my observation as a scrutineer.
I think I was listening in on that one over the telephone, so you can't quite get the vibe over the telephone, but yeah, I can understand where you're coming from with that. So can we move to have the minutes noted, to receive them? Thank you. No. General. I'm moving on now to item number 14, which I did mention earlier. I'd just like to reiterate to all members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee the importance of us attending the Policy and Resources meetings when it's our turn to scrutinise them. It needs to be done because we need to know if anything needs to be bringing towards the committee. Recently there has been some issues with members not attending and not letting me know, so I haven't been able to get anybody to go in your place. So the rotas have now been sent out again, and I think if everyone can, if they can't attend in the first place, try and get somebody to go for them, and if they still can't, if they could let myself know and Democratic Services, and then we can at least have apologies. I think it does need clearing up on whether, I know myself, I've attended both the last two, not last week's, but the two before that, by electronic means, either by the viewing it live or on the telephone. But there has been some worries from other councillors regarding that, and whether that's we should actually be here in person. So I just wonder if Simon, could you answer that?
I think, Chair, in terms of the legal requirements, it's for members of a committee to be present, and when you're attending Policy and Resources as an observer, you're not a member of that committee. But that said, I know some members have expressed views that they think there's more to be gained from actually being physically present in the meeting in terms of what you can pick up and scrutinise. So the committee tonight may wish to decide that they'd like observers to attend in person, but that's not a legal requirement.
Thank you, Simon. So I think we should perhaps decide amongst ourselves here, or put your hand up on whether you think we should be attending in person or by electronic means. Councillor Watt.
Yeah, this is not meant to sound unprofessional or any comments to officers, but I did want to join a committee as an observer some months ago now, and being a bit naive to it, but I was told I could join electronically even though I could have gone to the meeting, so that's another issue. But what I was going to say was, if there are three of us down to go to the meeting, and not everybody can attend meetings, if there are a caveat, I don't know, one or two of those three present to get the feel of the live meeting, does it mean that everybody has to be there? If we can watch it electronically these days, I know, as Councillor Raper said, it's a bit difficult if something goes into exempt. I appreciate that. I mean, I would like to attend if I could, but it's not always the case. Rather than making an excuse for not being there, if you can watch it electronically, I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, I personally think the best way would be if you were present, because as Councillor Oxley said, you can read the meeting better and you miss things that otherwise you wouldn't see if it's online. But obviously, if you can't attend in person, then the next best thing would be to do it electronically. Councillor Raper.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm a stalwart for saying you should be there. On this occasion I wasn't, but I'm coming out with not a lame excuse, but I couldn't get there. I didn't have the car because my wife had to go to work and she works on a stroke rehab ward. I'm thinking saving lives was more important on this occasion. So I would have been there had I could have got down to Rydale House, but I was bereft of transport. And there was nobody that I knew that was going to be on the committee from this group could have picked me up and brought me down. And by the time that my wife got a late call, can you come in, we're desperate, it was a little bit late. So it's a lame excuse, sorry, but I'll do better for next time. But I try to get to these, and sometimes I attend to ones I'm not even down for. So that's my excuse.
Thank you, Councillor Raper. If you can't ever attend, if you could let myself know, and then either I shall try and attend or get somebody else on the committee to attend in anybody's place.
I came in on the council's website as well, because I didn't have any link to come in on, and that's why I got chopped off when it went into exempt. So it might be useful if there was a way to get a link for anybody member to be able to go and look in, if it's included as part and parcel of every notice that goes out with the agenda, that if you want to observe this, this is the link. And then you can see all and sundry. That's the only positive I can bring out from my absence, physically.
As far as I'm aware, Simon, the people that are supposed to be observing are sent the link, aren't they, to the P&R meetings?
I can double check that that's going out. I think the assumption is that people will attend in person unless they say otherwise. So sometimes individuals have asked for the link, but in terms of policy and resources, last week we didn't go into exempt. The committee continued in public and didn't take any items in exempt, so it shouldn't have been a problem viewing on the live stream.
Thank you. Councillor Oxley.
Yeah, I think, I mean, personal view out first, I think there's huge advantage in 3 members of ONS being sat in the P&R committee meeting to get everything that's going. And I do appreciate the fact that that's not always possible. Who's doing what nights is well in advance, so there's plenty of time for people to sort out dates they can't do. And if there's a last minute thing, then I'm sure through yourself, through Simon, we can arrange a substitute. I do recognise the fact that sometimes there might be issues that mean that nominated people can't get here for whatever reason. And my suggestion on that would be, if they can't get here and there's no substitute, or they can't get here but they don't want to substitute, as long as the people in the room knew that that observer was actually on the line listening, it would help enormously. The last meeting that I was at, the June meeting, I was on my own physically. I now know that at least 2 other people were watching it, but I had no idea of that. And it just would have been nice to know that we had the 3 people there, because I think having three scrutiny committee observers at P&R is a fundamental check and balance in the way that this council works.
Councillor Wass.
In respect to that, I mean, when I was questioning whether we all 3 needs to be there, I was just putting it out, you know. I appreciate what you're saying, but what I'm going to say is then, if we've all got to be there, well, then we've got to vote on that, I think, and say, right, we've all got to be present physically. If that's not the case, then do we have some sort of method of reporting back to the committee if we're going to go down an electronic route and have 1 person here but the other 2 don't need to be here? You know, it's accountability, isn't it?
Councillor Oxley.
We're not disagreeing, Clive. I'm very happy to go down that path as long as it's formally agreed. I just think if people can physically be here, it would help enormously. I think it helps the officers as well.
Councillor Bailey.
I agree. I think the default position is that you should be attending in person if it is a face-to-face meeting. I mean, for those of us who still haven't got television back from the Billsdale mast, you can always watch the live stream, I suppose. So it is possible to be, to catch up on those things. But I think we should just say default is be there. If you can't be there, do your best. Yeah.
Councillor Gorbett-Moore, your view?
I agree with my two colleagues, but I do think we should have, if it's best for people's circumstances, the option to come electronically, but it should be logged through Simon. That's the way I did it, and it appeared on the minutes as being there because I did it through the right routes. But yeah, we should be here in person if we can, but I think there should be that second option to come electronically if you can't make it for whatever reason, like Councillor Raper, for example. Yeah, cheers.
Councillor Rain.
Thank you. Well, basically, yeah, if it can, you're allowed to attend, not in person, if that's at all possible, because I work 12-hour days, and if I cannot get cover for my teaching classes, and sometimes it's just impossible, I just wouldn't make it, but I might be able to remain in my office and attend that way. So if that was possible. Okay.
Yeah. So, Councillor Watts, did you seem to want to vote on this?
I mean, personally, if I could be here, I'd be here. I do appreciate and agree with what Councillor Oxley's saying. But there again, COVID and everything else, we learnt a different way. So, it's been supportive. I think we should be here to support the officers and ask the important questions. That's what we're down to do. And I think if you're going in through another meeting, through another means other than Teams, then you're limited because you can't ask the questions. That's the other issue. But I think to make it fair, and Councillor Wren has a valid point about, how we work in this day and age and in the past, then I think it's only fair that we should vote.
Councillor Bailey.
Well, it's interesting because hybrid meetings, I understand, are not legal. You can't now go to a meeting virtually because I know the legal advice that I've had in the different authorities sort of said, well, actually, someone who can't join our P&R meeting virtually and vote, you can't be considered to be present. Before that was clarified, there was a grey area that you could take advantage of. So although scrutiny members are not present, I suppose, as part of P&R, I think that the default position at the moment is that to attend a meeting, you must be present. And I think that's a fairly clear sort of impetus. So I'm not sure whether you could count us as being present if we were not there in person, although it still would be really useful, obviously, for scrutiny members to catch up on what was going on. But I don't think you could say that we were virtually present as part of that, even though we're not on P&R. Simon might have a different view.
Okay, Simon, so do you want to answer that?
Yes, as I'd sort of outlined at the start of this item, it's members of a committee where there's a legal requirement to be physically present and to be able to contribute to the debate and to vote, because the ONS observers attending a meeting are effectively there to watch it and then report back to this committee. In terms of policy and resources, they're not legally present in the sense of being listed as a committee member in the minutes. They'd be listed as in attendance, which is where I think the position is slightly different legally. But that said, as Councillor Bailey says, there is it's quite clear at the moment that for committee members you must be physically present, so that's sort of the direction things are moving in as we come out of COVID, although we have as a council put representations into the government following feedback from members about some of the benefits that there might be to us as an authority of being able to have the option of hybrid meetings in the longer term, but currently that's not lawful, and the emphasis in England is on physical attendance, different in Wales and Scotland though.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Woffs.
Is that hybrid meetings for officers, Simon, or for committee members?
In terms of what we've fed back to government, it was for members as well, that we'd sought feedback from members about the format of meetings and so on, and I think the views we'd had from members from across the board were that there are occasions when people can't get, whether that's because they're unwell or they're self-isolating or because of work or family commitments, and or bad weather potentially as well in the winter, and therefore to have that flexibility to be able to join a meeting virtually when maybe you can't get there in person would be helpful. That's not currently legal, but the government are consulting and forming a view about whether they might change the law in the future.
Councillor Rain.
I'm just wondering, with a lot of meetings I've been attending recently, not council, there is a lot where if you can't attend, that it's recorded and you can listen to the recording, and you're still classed as, you want to do that because you want to know what's going on. And is there any opinion on that side of things?
I think we can all watch it afterwards, and then if we've got any comments on it, anything that we want to scrutinise, I think we could bring that to the group. I think that's available anyway. Councillor Oxley.
Yeah, so we seem to be overcomplicating something when we've got a very simple default position. As it stands now, my understanding is that 3 people are nominated on the rota, and the expectation is that they will attend. If they can't attend, they notify yourself or Simon to say they can't attend, and they look for a substitute to attend the meeting. I think that works perfectly well. Maybe the only thing we need to add is that if we haven't got 3 people who can attend, then nominated people, non-nominated people are actually the scrutineers who are at the end of a line because they can't attend for whatever reason. That would work perfectly well for me. I guess the only complication would be is if you had somebody who was down to scrutinise who physically couldn't get here but wanted to be part of that meeting, then they would say, well, rather than have a substitute, I'd rather sit on the line and watch it myself and be the official scrutineer. I think between those 2 things, we've got the solution in our own hands.
So shall we take a vote on this? The default position is that we turn up if we're on the rota. If not, we do it electronically, and if neither are possible, then we get a substitute.
My only issue with that is if all 3 people on the rota say they can't come, but they can sit at the end of the line and watch, and then you've got nobody physically in the room, which I think is important.
I think put it the wrong way around. I think attend first, get a substitute second, and this last resort on the line, because the aim is to have somebody in the room, obviously, scrutinising the meetings.
I'd second that.
Will you second that? My point of view is that as long as one person at least is here in body, I think if there was the other 2 were electronically doing it, I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah.
Councillor Woffs. Councillor Raper.
Thank you. Can I test the worst case scenario just for a moment through Simon? If nobody can attend physically and nobody can attend electronically, literally, and a decision is then called in subsequently from listening to a transcript or whatever, is that legal?
You don't have to be present at the meeting to call in a decision. Indeed, in the past, we've had members who've called something in who weren't the designated policy and resources observers from this committee. Just in terms of one other sort of point of advice that you might want to take account of when reaching a conclusion on this. At the moment, we obviously have got Teams links, we've got live streams of meetings, and that's part of the health and safety arrangements and mitigations we've got in place for COVID. That's not to say that they'll always be there. So if we're putting a solution in place that relies on them, that might be the wrong solution to go with.
Okay, so the default is we attend. If we can't, we let either myself or Simon know and we get a substitute. Is that, are we all agreed on that? Do we need to vote or shall we vote? Do we need to record a vote? Or? I don't think there's general affirmation. Yeah. What? Yeah. General affirmation. Yes, thank you.
Yes, Chair.
I'm getting overexcited. I'm on my way to being a granddad before the night's
Oh, wow. Well, I think that's everything. Thank you to all the officers for the reports and for facilitating the meeting, and thank you to the councillors for attending. Good night.
Good night.